I'm between you and your coffee and your croissant and your sandwiches, so I understand the importance of time here. It was interesting, all my preceding presentations talked about complexity, talked about the challenge of making this real, talked about the challenge of time. And it was interesting to me hearing all those details to think of it from a vendor perspective and ask the basic question. If it is so challenging, if it is so complex, if it takes so long, what is the right way to approach given the fact that every operator in the room here wants to start virtualizing, if they haven't, at a very rapid pace? And so from an audience perspective, it is very interesting for us to ask some of the basic questions and start with some very basic proposition. So let me ask the very basic questions first. How many people in the network side of the organization here today? Very good. How many people from the IT side of the organization, service provider organization today? A few. You guys are the guys who spend the money. Let's ask the next obvious question. How many people from the business side, sales and marketing, service provider here today? A few. You guys should come more because you are the guys who actually bring in the money. And so all the discussions that were happening earlier on were really about making you successful, the business people, so that you can bring in more money for service providers. But there are very few of you, and we constantly think about how to make you successful. And what I'm going to talk about today is really that, how to help you make money, how to make you make money, not just now, how to make you make money much more quickly. And so I'll start with the obvious, which is enterprises are going digital. How much more obvious than this can it be? But the next more interesting question is, how many cloud services does an average enterprise use? An average B2B, average business. Anybody want to take a guess? Show of hands. How many, let's say 0 to 100. How many of you think an average enterprise, how many cloud services does it use? 0 to 100. A few. 100 to 250. A few. 250 to 500. A few. More than 500 cloud application, a typical enterprise. Anybody? It's actually 514. Think of it. Here's the breakdown in terms of a typical enterprise and how many cloud services are they using. Marketing, as expected, 91. This is the scary one. HR using 90 cloud applications. If you think you are terrified of HR, wait 2 more years. Okay? And what you see here is a collection of enterprise applications that are the most popular, that are typically the ones. In 2 years' time, it is expected that an average enterprise will use close to 5,000 cloud applications. Now, putting aside the network people, putting aside the IT people, even if you want to think in terms of pure infrastructure, you add more numbers to this and say, okay, so we know they are using about 500 cloud applications today. They will use about 3,000 in a couple of years' time. What percentage of workload is expected to be in the cloud by 2020? 94%. What percent of enterprises have a multi-cloud strategy? They're already thinking in terms of multiple clouds that they will use for hosting, running, and managing these applications. 85%. Which begs the question, if you are in the business of providing connectivity and value-added services, and if your enterprise customers, if this is the behavior that they are exhibiting, do you have the luxury of time to debate the complexity? Do you have the luxury of time to discuss what will be the ideal standard for us to deploy a virtualized infrastructure. Or to take Axel's earlier example of religious iconography, do you have the time to debate how many VNFs can dance on the head of a pin? We today are involved in some of the biggest virtualization initiatives in the industry. Name any top 10 operator in the world, we are involved in helping them orchestrate, helping them onboard VNFs, helping them deploy virtualized infrastructure and services. But there is a whole lot of customers of ours who are sitting by the side and wondering when and how can they best get into becoming virtual service providers. And what they are looking at are essentially two things. One is obviously cloud connectivity, because their enterprise customers, and I'm not talking about residential market here because that's a race to the bottom unless you're delivering video. Their enterprise customers, which is where the real money is, and that's the market that you need to defend aggressively, cloud connectivity is an $11 billion opportunity, and the service provider share of that SD-WAN market, which is that $11 billion opportunity, is about 16%. In terms of actual cloud services, the value-added cloud services, a typical service provider share is about 12% of that $400 billion market opportunity. So who is making money in this business? And those are the set of vendors that you see up there. And if this doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. Because what you see is essentially an erosion of the B2B market by over-the-top providers, by providers who are coming and bringing in connectivity. They are not waiting for standards. They are not waiting to figure out what the complexity, how we will solve this complexity, and they are not waiting to figure out what's the best interoperable model. As one of my customers said just last week, that my biggest fear is that Skype comes in with a business Skype offering and SD-WAN over the top to my B2B customers. And if I wait for that to happen, it's already too late. And a majority of smaller operators, in many cases, some of the tier 2, tier 3 operators in the world, are facing this dilemma. Those that are tier 1 operators who have the budget, who do not necessarily feel the competitive pressure, who do not necessarily are worried about CapEx and OpEx spending, can absolutely debate how many VNFs can dance on the head of a pin before you start beginning major and massive deployment towards cloud-based virtualization. But the smaller operators, tier 2, tier 3, and some of the most innovative ones are not waiting. The challenge they are facing is it takes too long. You do your strategy definition, you build the business case, you settle on an enterprise architecture, make sure you send all your architects to events and conferences like this, beginning, I think Axel said, what was it, 2012? 6 years in a row. Then finally you get into some form of vendor selection and the RFPs, and you done proof of concepts, and then do your requirement analysis. Finally you make a bunch of selection, maybe one vendor, maybe one full stack, maybe a few vendors, and you finally make it happen. Average deployment time for any level of virtualized network function services today, 12 months, 18 months, typically 24 months. There is a whole swath of operators that are going through this, are working through this, and asking themselves, looking at their business colleagues, the few hands that we saw in the audience, do we have the luxury of time? Do we have the luxury of time to get all these things done before we start deploying? And that is the challenge we have addressed. Given the fact that we have been involved in this since 2011, our parent NEC of Japan faced a national mandate after the major East Japan earthquake, the tsunami, the Fukushima nuclear disaster. The Japanese government put a mandate in place that in case of a catastrophic event like this, you have a telecom infrastructure that is able to handle such incredible loads and is able to dynamically adjust and manage for capacity. And so since 2011, under that government mandate, we have been deploying virtual infrastructure all across Japan. And that 7 years of learning has basically gone into addressing this problem, which is how do you solve this challenge of time to market for our business side, for the operators, the sales, marketing, and the business side to take services to the market. And that is the approach that we launched yesterday. We call it Netcracker Business Cloud. It is a full stack SD and NFV solution available as a service, essentially addressing exactly the challenges that I mentioned before. That if you want to deploy fast, if you want to deploy quick, while you figure out the perfect architecture, while you figure out the perfect integration model, while you figure out and build out this infrastructure, if you can afford to wait, wonderful. If you can't, here is a solution for you. It's a hosted and run solution by Netcracker. It's a multi-cloud solution, so you can pick pieces of it. You can take the whole thing. It can be run as a build, operate, transfer model, so we can offer it to you as a service. As it grows, starting with SD-WAN, for example, but it doesn't have to be that, you can bring it in and run it yourself. And the primary objective of this solution is really helping you deploy very, very quickly. I'm going to talk about 3 case studies, 3 customer examples that are already doing this. The solution is microservices based, as you would expect for something like this that's in the cloud, where you can pick discrete slices, discrete functionality, choose to deploy it, as I said, as a full stack, or you could choose to deploy it as individual services, whether it's connectivity services, whether it's value-added network services, or even enterprise applications. And the 3 examples that I'm going to talk to you about essentially cover that entire gamut. And it delivers 8x faster deployment. You can average deployment time can be anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. Try not to fall off the chair, as compared to 12 to 24 months. It allows for incredibly different kind of cost models and commercial models, pay as you go. It allows for a model that enables risk sharing. And so it is a rapid time to market for those operators that are looking to get into cloud-based virtualized offerings, specifically on the B2B side, and to be able to do it quickly and aggressively. The solution allows for starting at any point in time. This particular case study, this particular example, is an operator in Latin America, 45 million subscribers, so it's not a small operator, targeting the B2B market. Just last week, they announced the launch of this commercial service. It was deployed in 12 weeks, the full stack, and they are going to market with SD-WAN in 3 flavors. The first one is the most basic one. Second and third layer a bunch of value-added services over that SD-WAN offering. Obviously, the elephant in the room for any operator looking at B2B offering is how do we protect our MPLS revenues? How do we start offering SD-WAN or any other services that allow for greater bandwidth and faster deployment at a cheaper price while we still try and control and manage, play the managed market share game by trying to protect the MPLS revenues. In many markets, that's not necessarily a choice, because the amount of competition, amount of over-the-top providers are coming in with SD-WAN-like services, and if you don't offer it, somebody else is going to, whether it's Skype, whether it's somebody else. And so as they figure out the right mix of balance in terms of where do we offer the right MPLS services, where do we offer the right SD-WAN-like services, or any other enterprise value-added services, It is similar to the example that Verizon talked about, which is instead of going and saying, here is a connectivity offering for you, or here is an SD-WAN or an MPLS offering for you, it is asking an enterprise, what is that problem that you are looking to solve, and how can we bring the right mix of technology and access to you. And so the solution that was deployed by this large operator in Latin America, a 12-week deployment cycle from the time of deciding that here is what we want to do. Exactly the same situation. Don't have necessarily unlimited CapEx and OpEx, don't have the time to go through long vendor selection cycles, don't have the time to train our workforce to be able to handle the next generation of technology, don't have the time to be able to create the right integration environment. We will do all of those things, but while we learn, while we master all of that, the business side says, I need to go to market now. And so the solution that they chose to work with us was a cloud-based solution where we offer the full stack SDN and NFV as a service with a 12-week deployment cycle. They can start with the 3 flavors of SD-WAN and take it to the market. Another example, one of the most disruptive mobile operators in the United States starts offering an M2M IoT service in 8 weeks. Again, a similar model, but in this case, it's multi-cloud. Part of it is hosted in their cloud, part of it is hosted in our cloud, and with a tight 8-week deployment cycle, IoT M2M platform offered to all MVNOs, offered to all of their enterprise partners and customers as a platform, as a service from the cloud. Again, while they figure out what's the right way to commercialize M2M and IoT at scale, while they master the intricacies of integrating this massive scale connectivity challenge, as they put in place a 5G infrastructure, if they wait for all of that to happen, the market passes them by. And therefore, they have made a remarkable progress on the consumer market, exceptionally disruptive on the consumer side, now beginning their entry on the B2B side with disruptive models on B2B and IoT. Speed to market has always been their benchmark to success. And this, again, this approach of saying, while we master the technology, while we master the processes, while we manage the integration, we're going to start using this as a service from people who can enable us to give it. And the last example is, again, a competition that oftentimes is overlooked, the value-added resellers. In the world of virtualization, the value-added resellers face a challenge because effectively, what are value-added resellers? They are router resellers, effectively a channel to the market for most router vendors. You know, in the world of virtualization, where do they survive? Where do they grow and how do they grow? And to them, going up that value chain, delivering enterprise applications quickly and aggressively, and they have absolutely no pretense of trying to define a perfect architecture. What does the VAR care about what a perfect architecture is? They have absolutely no pretense in worrying about what is going to integrate with whom. All they care about is, can we take a product or a service or an application, and for that matter, connectivity with any of these over-the-top services, including SD-WAN, to our enterprise customers. And for them to do that, what do they need? They need a cloud-based platform from where they can take all of these applications and bring it to their B2B, bring it to their enterprise market. Because the traditional business is as much under risk as increased virtualization, and as the examples that we saw on the enterprise side, as all of them move to the cloud, whether it's for their connectivity, compute, storage, or applications. And so the value-added reseller, in this particular case, one of the biggest value-added reseller in the Germanic countries in Europe, the revenue of over $3 billion, is turning on a dime, realizing the fact that the days of reselling physical routers are going to be over fairly quickly. and it's time to move up aggressively into enterprise application as a value-added reseller, start selling enterprise applications, and oh, by the way, we could even start selling connectivity, over-the-top connectivity services like SD-WAN and everything that goes with it, security and LAN extension, and you name it. And so this is another example of one of our customers who has chosen speed, has chosen quickness, has chosen speed to market as their first choice, as opposed to working through the challenges of large integration, large projects, large transformation. So as we get ready for this world of virtualization and cloud, it's also perhaps time to think about not just using virtualization cloud as a way to transform our infrastructure as an operator, but also to use virtualization and cloud that is available to you now as a service to take it to the market. Jack Welch had a saying that if the rate of change outside your organization, outside your industry, exceeds the rate of change inside, the end is near. Does any of you doubt for a moment that your enterprise customers are much further ahead than you are in terms of consumption of cloud, consumption of cloud-based applications, and consumption of cloud-based infrastructure? And if you believe you are the prime connectivity provider to that set of enterprise customers, and if they are moving faster and changing faster than you are, then this is the outcome we face. And so the Netcracker Business Cloud is exactly that solution that we are bringing to the market for you, so that you don't have to wait to be able to give your enterprise customers the connectivity they need, the value-added applications they need, and to provide the platform for their growth, and through that, provide the platform for your own growth. Thank you.